Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. We do have quite a lot of campaigns launching this week. I think I have over 20 just to go over just in this video. But before we get into it, I do like to go over some new announcements and discoveries I just found out about, and I do have a couple that I want to mention. First one here is that there is going to be a new Witcher game coming to GameFound. This is a card-driven tableau builder, and I haven't had a chance to look into this one too much yet, but they do have a bit of info on their campaign. Of course, I will go into this one in a lot more detail during the week of its launch, which will be October 19th, according to the best Discord on the internet, which is linked in the description below. If you like keeping up with campaigns, you definitely want to be checking out the Discord, because sometimes we have dates on here even before they show up on the GameFound page themselves. We also throw all the links on here as we find them for the BGG page, the campaign itself, as well as any tabletop simulators or videos that might be relevant. And if you're interested to see what campaigns are coming up, we do have everything organized on the left-hand side into these categories based on how soon they are in the future. And the next campaign here actually already launched, but I didn't get the advance notice on this one, so I actually ended up missing it during the week of its launch. So I just want to give it a quick mention now, just because it is a bigger campaign. And this one is in the top 50 on Board Game Geek, and it is, of course, Everdell. And this one's going to be offering, I think, everything that's ever been offered for Everdell on Kickstarter or retail. We're going to be offering a whole bunch of new stuff as well, like different blankets that come in all sorts of different prints. And if you want to get an idea of what they'll look like, they do have some kind of live images down here. There'll also be plushies for all the different animals and creatures. And there's also going to be, like I said, all the different content and games that were previously released, as well as the new Far Shore standalone game if you are interested in that. And everything here is offered at a very reasonable price, and there's also going to be the deluxeified components as well as a few other items like puzzles that are only $9 each. And even some board game carrying bags, which one is offered for just 15 bucks, which is pretty nice. It's not going to be the most beautiful bag in the world, but it's going to get your games to where you want to go. So a carrying bag for 15 bucks is pretty nice. And since I did miss this one in the week of its launch, I will throw the link to the campaign in the description below. And I think there's only a few days left on this one at the time of me filming this. But it looks like there's about 6 days left, so if you are watching this video within a week of it going up, it should still be available. But I'm sure there'll be a late pledge as well, but if you are interested in Everdell, or if you're looking to get those deluxeified components, this is a really great option. As always, I do like to give a quick mention over to Alex at Board Game Co, because him and I do work together tracking all these campaigns, and we sync up periodically just to make sure we have the most up-to-date info as possible. And September is a pretty heavy month because it's still going on, and we have more games in a single week than what we have in some months. So we've really had our work cut out for us this month, but I hope all this extra work at least helps save you a bit of time in finding the games that might be interesting to you. And if it does, both Alex and I do appreciate a like and subscribe. It helps us grow our channels, but then more importantly, it also helps other people in the board game community find these videos and hopefully get value out of them as well. Of course, Alex offers a lot more diverse content than I do, so if you do want a bit of different content as well, definitely go check him out, and I'll have a link to his campaign in the description below. And like I said, there's a ton of games to cover this week, and there's a lot to be excited about. We are going to be starting this one off with a bang, because the first campaign we have is actually the next campaign being offered by Ryan Lockett over at Red Raven Games. And this one is called Creature Caravan, and this one's going to be launching on September 18th, and it plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And although this game does take place in the same universe as a lot of other games published by Red Raven Games, this one actually plays quite a lot differently from anything else that they've offered up to now. In this game, players are going to be running their own caravans, working independently of each other, but also competitively against each other in order to be the first to make it from the left-hand side of the board all the way to the right-hand side. And there's going to be a different terrain that you're going to be navigating through, different items you can pick up along the way, but of course there will also be different threats. And the main threat in this game does come in the form of something known as Ember Zombies. And these aren't exactly your typical zombies, because these bodies have actually been reanimated by the fire fairies that happen to inhabit this part of the land. In order to set up the main board, players are going to be randomly placing 4 different map tiles into the center of the table within reach of all players, and each of these tiles is going to be broken into a bunch of different spaces that players are going to be navigating through. But of course, the players are going to be starting on the leftmost column on that leftmost tile. Players will each choose a space to place their meatball, and that's going to be representing their caravan over the course of the game. But in order to play this game, players are going to be playing actions primarily through dice worker placement. At the start of each round, players are going to be simultaneously rolling their 5 dice, and then on your board you're going to have a whole bunch of different options to place your dice, and you can also gain cards throughout the game as you add more characters onto your caravan, and those will also come with their own dice worker placement spots as well, offering you more options and combinations each and every round. But the way that the dice placement works here is that there is a value located on your board or your card, and the value there represents the lowest value die that can be placed there in order to activate that action. This means that your higher value dice are more valuable and it still can be used there to perform that action. But of course, there are some spaces that use multiple dice, and you do need a single die in each of those spaces, higher than the value shown for each of those, but you do need all of those dice in order to perform that action. These actions can allow you to do all sorts of different things, like gain additional cards into your hand, gain different resources like food, goods, or money, which are the 3 primary resources in the game, and you'll be spending those in order to activate your cards, putting them into your tableau, or to perform other actions that are offered in the game. But there is also an action to attack any zombies within your space or to trade goods or gold at the market, and I'll come back to both of those in a second here, because the last action I want to talk about is of course the movement action, and there's a whole bunch of different terrain, and moving through different terrain can be more difficult than others, and this is shown at the top of your board where you just need a single die of 3 or more to move through an empty plane, but to move through any terrain you need a combination of 3 dice. But getting back to when a player decides to use the trade action, that's actually going to allow them to trade in either any amount of gold or any amount of goods in order to put one of their tokens at the top of either of these tracks. And you can see there's a whole bunch of different columns here, each with a different cost as well as a different amount of victory points that they reward. And the reason that there's so many of these is because each column can only be done maximum once per person, but once a person decides to trade in an amount of gold or an amount of goods in order to put one of their cubes up on one of these columns, they're actually going to be starting a timer that limits the amount of time that the other players have in order to also complete that column. Because once a cube is added to the topmost row of one of these columns, it's going to be moving down 1 notch every round, and once it reaches that bottom location, no other player can do that for the rest of the game. But as you can see, these aren't the only tracks here, because we do also have the zombie track on the left here, but this one does work a little bit differently because the only way to get onto this track is by fighting zombies, and the only way to fight zombies is by finding them on the main board. Anytime that you move your caravan into one of these locations that have this little skull and crossbones, that's going to be allowing you to fight a zombie, but it is not required. The catch here is that anytime you move into one of these spaces, you will be taking damage, and the only way to heal damage is by fighting zombies, but like I said, you don't have to fight the zombies, but you will be carrying that damage with you until you heal it by fighting zombies later. And the attack action is the only action spot that doesn't have a minimum specific value associated with it, and the reason for that is because you can place whatever value die you want there, but the value that you put there is going to dictate the amount of damage that you do. So if you put a 6 there, that's going to be dealing 6 damage. And of course, this is going to dictate where you get to put your cube on that zombie board. So higher damage is more difficult to attain, which means if you're able to get your cube up there sooner than others, you might be completely blocking off that option to the other players in the future. But the cool thing about the attack action is that if you do gain other characters into your caravan by gaining those cards and then playing them into your tableau, you can actually stack those together to increase your total damage, which will then make it easier for you to get higher up on this board. And like I said, there are actions to draw more of these cards into your hand, but in order to add them to your tableau, you do have to pay the cost, which is going to be located on the top left corner of those cards. And you just go ahead and pay those if you have the resources to do so, and that's going to be adding more actions into your tableau. And once you've added that card into your tableau, not only do you gain access to its unique worker placement location, but you'll also be able to unlock its victory point scoring potential. And a lot of these cards also come with unique effects and abilities that are only specific to that card. But as players are moving across the board, they can also find some other icons that are a little bit more helpful than the zombies, and these are the treasure chest icons as well as the fruit icons. The treasure chest icons can grant you different bonuses and victory point potential at the end of the game, while the fruit allow you to modify your dice rolls on your turn to try and re-roll certain dice in order to try and get the combinations that you're looking for. At the end of a player's turn, they also get to put a tent token in the location that they ended their turn on, and each of these are going to be worth a victory point at the end of the game, but you can only put a tent token there if you don't already have one, which is going to incentivize each player to always be moving forward. I personally think this game looks like a ton of fun. I think it's making a lot of really good design decisions. I really like the way those different tracks work, and I really do like dice worker placement, and I especially like that you can add new cards into your tableau, creating new worker locations for you to place those dice. I'm also a big fan of games that are easy to teach and play, and I think this checks off both those boxes, especially with the simultaneous dice rolling and worker placement, because this is going to allow you to play with any number of players without adding on to that game length in a significant way. I get a ton of flack in the comment section because as I go through all these games, a lot of you end up discovering new games that you had no idea about before that you end up becoming very interested in, which ends up costing you a bit from your bank account. But I just want all of you to know that I am no exception to this. Going through all of these games each and every week, there are always games that I discover that end up wanting to take my money, and this is definitely one of them. This one surprised me, and it is a game that I do want to add to my own personal collection, so I'm going to be following this one with the intention of backing it. But of course, it will also depend on the price point because I am on a limited budget here. But if this one looks interesting to you, you can check it out in the description below. But if that one didn't interest you, you might still want to check it out because there are quite a few other games offered in this campaign as well, because they're also going to be introducing a brand new RPG, which is going to be taking you into the world of Arzium, which is featured in a lot of their previous games. So you're going to be seeing a lot of the same faces and locations that you've seen in previous games, and you can also use some of the components from those previous games to augment the RPG experience. Of course, this also features that same excellent artwork by Ryan Lockett himself, and in this game, players are going to have a 5-stat system, which is going to offer you other ways to deal with enemies other than just combat. But the whole story behind this adventure is that players are going to be trying to uncover a worldwide mystery as they fly their airship across the world, visiting these various locations and even discovering some new ones. Everything's included that you need to play the game, but like I said, you can include components from the other games if you do own them, which are not necessary, but you can include them if you like. This campaign is also going to be introducing a new version of Islebound known as the Emerald Edition, which is going to be introducing a new resource, but it's also going to be changing up some of the rules and completely revamping some of the decks. And this is a game that's been out for a while now, so if it's a game you already know you like, this might be a good opportunity to jump in on it. But if you do want to learn more, there are a ton of reviews and playthroughs over on YouTube, and you can just find those for yourself. But there are going to be a few other hard-to-find Arzium products, including Rome and Near and Far, which are going to be available in this campaign as well. So if you're interested in any of that, I do have the links down below, and you can click to get notified. Also launching on September 18th, we have Bone Wars, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And in this game, players are going to be competing as paleontologists as they work to dig up various bones at different dig sites, and then put those bones together to put them out on display and publish papers on them in order to gain victory points. But that's not the only path to victory, because players can also bribe, steal, or destroy their opponent's work in order to put their reputation in question. This is a game that plays over just 4 rounds, and players are going to be using action cards in order to perform various actions throughout the game. There's 2 main types of action cards. There is your dig team action cards, and then there are the paleontologist action cards. Each of these action cards can have a different set of actions that they allow you to do, but they're all going to be limited to their specific type of card, with the dig team action cards allowing you to do different things like move around to the different locations, dig up the bones at those locations to gain those specific bone tiles, or to gain new species cards, which is what you're going to be using those bone tiles to try and complete, because each of those cards will have some set of bone tiles that are required in order to complete them, and if you're able to acquire those and spend those with that card, then you will gain the associated bonuses. There are some other actions available with these team cards as well, but they all have to do with gathering those bones and then using them to fulfill those species cards. The paleontologist cards work a little bit differently because these are what are going to allow you to cash in on all the work of your dig team because any of those species cards that you're able to complete, you'll be able to publish papers on them, which will allow you to move those cards to the top of your board, creating multiple stacks at the top of your board and gaining a bonus based on how big that stack gets. But another important detail about this game is that there's going to be 2 lead paleontologists that are not controlled by any player, but players are going to be forming alliances to one or the other. Every time you publish a paper, you're going to be assigning a certain amount of points to one of those paleontologists, and this is going to be how you're going to be earning them more reputation throughout the game, hopefully with you being allied with the one that has the higher reputation, because that's going to earn you more victory points and bonuses throughout the game. But there are actions that do allow you to change your alliance or to debunk some of the papers assigned to one of those paleontologists or to move one of those papers from one to the other. But players can only change their allegiance up to twice per game, so timing is going to be really important here. But there are some other actions you can perform that involve a little less betrayal, and that's to claim awards once you gain enough knowledge in a specific category of dinosaurs. Or you can also sell any of your species cards that maybe aren't as useful to you in order to gain bonuses from the black market. But before you go ahead and sell all your unused species cards, it is important to know that they can be used as an action card as well, because you do have your dig team action cards and your paleontologist action cards with their own associated actions, but then the species cards can actually have actions from either of those 2 categories. The catch here is that if you do decide to use a species card for an action, it's going to get discarded and you can't use it in combination with your bones and you can't sell it at the black market. But the game continues like this, and the player with the most victory points at the end of 4 rounds wins the game, and if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I have the links in the description below. Also launching on September 19th, we have the 3rd season for Final Girl, and this is a solo game that takes about 20 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a game that riffs on all those old movie tropes and franchises, offering you a whole bunch of separate boxes with locations, killers, as well as final girls that you can mix together in various ways and create all sorts of pretty much endless combinations. This new season is going to be adding more of that content into the mix with 5 new boxes, and these ones are going to be taking inspiration from movies like Terminator, as well as Hellraiser, Stranger Things, Saw, and finally Tremors, which if you ask the child version of me, is one of the best horror movies ever made. But like I said, this is a campaign that's on its 3rd season now, so I did already cover this one in the past during its previous campaign, and I think I did a pretty good job explaining how the game actually plays, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And the way that this game works is that there's a core box that contains all the core components and the core rule set of the game. And then you have all these different feature presentations that come in these different boxes, and they kind of are little spin-offs off of different horror tropes in the horror movie genre. And what those allow you to do is that you can actually choose a location and a killer from one of those boxes, and then you can mix that with any of the final girls from any of the other boxes. And the final girl is the character that you're going to be playing as, and you're the last hope against the killer. And as you can probably guess, if you've ever seen any horror movie in the history of mankind, I'm sure all of her friends were brutally murdered in idiotic and predictable ways. But that's in the past now, and it's up to you to prevent any future victims from falling to the killer and to try and take out that killer yourself. And once the game's set up, it'll look a little something like this, where you have your killer as well as your location, and then you have a few different metrics that you're tracking, such as your health, the time, and the horror track. The game plays over 5 different phases, and the first phase is the action phase. We're going to be playing different cards and rolling dice to determine the success level of those cards that you're playing. And the number of dice that you get to roll is completely dependent on where the horror track lies. If there is more horror, then you won't be able to roll as much dice, so you'll want to get that horror track down as much as possible, so you're maximizing the amount of dice that you get to roll. You can see in this image as well that there's a bunch of little meeples out on the map. These are all potential victims of the killer, and you can actually go around and try to rescue these before the killer can get to them. And whenever you rescue one of those victims, you'll be able to put it onto your player card, and this will give you different upgrades depending on the icon that it covers. But of course, you are the final girl and you have a job to do, and you don't want to waste all your time rescuing people. So the other action you can do is to try and attack the killer. And then after the action phase, we have the planning phase. And you can also think of this as sort of a market phase, because you'll be able to purchase cards. And the way that you do that is you'll be able to spend any remaining time that you had from the previous round in order to buy those cards. And you can spend all the time you have remaining, because after this phase, your time will reset. And then after that phase, you have the killer phase. And this is the phase where you reveal a card and it lets you know what the killer is going to do. But then you're also going to reveal a terror card that can allow the killer to perform some additional actions and affect your terror track and have other negative consequences. And of course, the killer's intention is to try and kill as many people as possible, especially the final girl. And for this reason, it's no surprise the next phase is known as the panic phase. And if the killer was able to take out any victims, and there's other victims that were also in that location, they're going to panic and they're going to perform different movements depending on where they are. And then the last phase is the upkeep phase, where you normally don't have to do very much. You just do a little bit of cleanup and prepare for the next round. And the game continues like this until you've taken out that killer or completed your endgame objectives, or if the killer's taken you out. Surprisingly, I couldn't find too much info on Final Girl Season 2, but I don't think it's changing up the core game too much. I think it's just adding more of those feature presentations to the game and adding a little bit more variety, and also an opportunity to jump in on the game if you missed out on the previous campaign. And if you are interested in solo games, you'll definitely want to look into this one some more and click that Notify Me on Launch button. And if we zoom and enhance on this image here, it can give us a little bit of an idea of what we can expect. And this first box looks like it's going to be riffing on the Alien series, where we have an alien monster and a character that looks like the main character from the Alien movies. And then this next one has you fighting the organism in Station 2891, and I can't really see the image too well, but it kind of looks Lovecraftian. And then we have the intruders at the Wingard Cottage, and the image on the box kind of looks like a Wendigo, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And then there's the big bad wolf in the Storybook Woods, which has you fighting up against a werewolf. And then the last one puts you in one of my least favorite settings, which is a mental asylum. Please just throw me in the middle of the woods or the center of a crop circle. Just don't put me in a mental asylum. I'm not ready. Also launched on the 19th, we have Founders, and this plays 2 to 5 players and takes just 35 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a new game that takes place in the same universe as this publisher's previous game, which was known as Ice. And if you're not familiar with this game, this was a tile digging game where players would be digging through multiple layers of tiles, spending those tiles to gain certain benefits or actions. However, this game is going to be working a lot differently because although it takes place in the same universe, it is a completely different game. But this is supposed to be a prequel in order of time, because in this game, rather than digging and removing those tiles, players are actually going to be the ones placing them. I don't have a whole ton of info on this game, but something that makes this one very, very interesting is because players are going to have hidden alliances. The way this game works is that there's going to be a bunch of different objective cards that players are going to be trying to complete, but at the start of the game, each player is going to be assigned to 2 of these. You're going to be trying to gain victory points in both of those unique ways, but the only victory points you're going to be gaining at the end of the game is your lowest of the 2. But there is a catch here, because for each of those objectives, there's going to be one other player that shares that objective with you, but you don't know which players those are. Of course, that means the success of those players will impact the success of your own, so you're going to want to keep an eye out and see what the other players are doing and try to identify which other players are the ones that share your objectives. But on your turn, you'll be placing a tile trying to fulfill the requirements of one of your 2 objectives, or possibly both, in order to raise the total amount of victory points that you can potentially earn from them. Of course, every time you do this, you're going to be giving away a little bit of information of the goals that you might be trying to go for, which the other players may be able to use to their advantage. The game continues like this, and then at the end of the game, each player is going to be scoring for their lower scoring objective, and then whoever has the highest victory points is going to be winning the game. Unfortunately, this is all the information I have on this game, so if you do want to check it out and it sounds interesting to you, I do have it linked down below, and you can check out the campaign to find more information there. And launching on September 19th, we have the Tiny Game Series, and this is going to be offering you 3 different games in a single campaign. And the first one is Sirens, and this is a competitive game for 1 to 2 players. It takes just 10 to 20 minutes to play. And the way this game works is that's going to be playing over a series of rounds, and every single round, players are trying to be the siren that lures the sailor to them. Once a player is able to acquire 2 sailors, they win the game. But the way that a round plays is that there's always going to be a rule card revealed at the start of the game, and this is also going to represent the sailor, because whoever wins the round is going to be taking that card just to indicate that they have won a round. But essentially the rule card is going to modify the scoring for that round, and each player is going to get dealt a hand of 4 song cards, and players will eventually be playing these cards down in front of them and then scoring victory points based on the total number of hearts out on the cards that they were able to play, the number of adjacent cards of the same color, but then also scoring for their flow by matching different edge colors and edge icons with the cards beside them. Of course, there is also the rounds rule card, which modifies the scoring, so you do have to take that into consideration as well. But after players are dealt their 4 cards, you're just going to be drafting one and then passing the remaining cards to the other player, going back and forth until there's only 1 card left, and then that card's going to be discarded. And then each player is going to have 3 cards in their hand, and then they can just put them down in front of them in any order that they like. Once you do this, you're going to be dealing out 4 cards again, drafting them until there's 1 left, discarding the 1, and then putting those cards down on the table in any order that you like as well, except you can only put them on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the cards that you already played. You're not allowed to mix them together. This triggers the end of the round, and then players are going to be tallying up their score based on all that scoring that I explained earlier. And then the player with the highest score gets to take that rule card to indicate that they lured 1 sailor towards their siren, and then they also get to flip the other player the bird. First player to win 2 rounds wins the game, and a really cool feature with this is that there is a downloadable app, and you'll be able to scan your series of cards in order to actually play that song and see what exactly it sounds like. And the next game offered in this campaign is going to allow you to go back and defragment your old neglected computer. This one's called Defrag, and it plays 1 to 2 players and takes just 15 to 25 minutes to play. And the way that you set this game up is that you're going to have a whole deck of cards, with each side of those cards having a number of icons, and they can be 1 of 4 different icons representing 4 different applications on your computer that you're trying to optimize. And you're going to be setting up the main play area by putting down a grid of cards with 1 of those cards missing. The way this works is that you're going to be drawing a card from that main draw deck, and then you can put it in any of the available empty spaces on the grid. When you do put it down, you can reorient that card any way that you like. These cards are double-sided, and like I said, there's going to be different icons on each edge of the card. And essentially what you're trying to do is get the icon that you're trying to score facing upwards, along with the cards that are above and below it, because anytime you do that, you'll be able to slide those cards on top of each other, forming a single stack. But when you do add that card into the grid, if you're able to match any of the icons with 1 or more of the cards beside it, you'll be able to rotate those adjacent cards any amount of times in order to orient them how you want those cards oriented. This can be very powerful because it can allow you to focus on multiple columns at once. And of course, you do want to keep an eye on how many of each icon is located along the edge of these cards, because more icons means more points if that's the icon that you're trying to score. The card you played will also have a special action located in the middle of the card, and you'll be able to perform that action after you've reoriented all your cards. And then you'll just be drawing the next card and doing the same thing until that entire draw deck runs out. And then you're going to be scoring based on the stack of cards that you have that is the largest. And then you're just going to be reshuffling and dealing out a new tableau of cards, and then doing that again for 1 of the different icons. Once you've scored each of those 4 different icons, you'll be tallying up your total score to determine how well you did if you're playing solo or cooperative mode. Otherwise, it's the player with the most victory points that wins the game. And the final game offered in this campaign is called 16 Candies, and this plays 3 to 4 players and takes just 20 to 40 minutes to play. And the gameplay in this one is pretty simple, but what's really interesting is the way that the scoring works. But in order to play this game, players are just going to get dealt 3 cards to them face down, and then you're going to be creating a draw pile with the remaining cards. But what's interesting here is that each of the rounds aren't going to have a fixed length or anything like that. Instead, any player can actually call the end of the round if they think they are the player with the most candies of a single type. Of course, if they're not ready to do that, they can just take their turn as normal, which just allows them to draw a card either from the top of the discard pile or blindly from the top of the draw deck, and then add that to their hand and then discard 1 of their other cards. You're always just going to have 3 cards in your hand, but of course each of the cards can have images of candies of different values, and you're just trying to accumulate the most of a single type. And once you feel like you are in a good position, you can call the end of the round. And if you did call the end of the round and you do have the most candies of a particular type, that's going to earn you 2 points. But if you were incorrect and someone else beat you, you're actually going to be losing points. But then also, no matter what, whoever has the lowest candies out of everyone is also going to be losing points that round as well. Each player does start the game with 16 points, but it is easier to lose your points rather than gain them, and if you do lose all your points, then you are eliminated from the game, and it's the player that is the last player standing that's going to win. And if this one sounds interesting to you, or any of these other games that I mentioned, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below. Also launching on September 19th, we have a campaign that's not for a board game, but rather for an RPG, so I'm not going to be spending quite as much time on this one, but I'll try to go over what makes this one unique. This is called Vynestra, and it is 5e compatible, but this is a high fantasy themed RPG that actually takes place in ancient Rome. The game offers a fully customizable ability system where players are going to be drawing their powers from the Roman gods. And then players can also take advantage of different mythical creatures, and of course use any gear and items that they find along the way. As players become more proficient with these powers from the gods, these powers can actually start manifesting themselves as tattoos on your character's body. As you become more and more in tune with this can eventually allow you to ascend into a demigod. The campaign booklet's going to offer you over 1,000 pages for you to explore, and if this one does sound interesting to you, you can find a link to it in the description below. And also launching on September 19th, we have Theme Park Mania, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes just 45 to 120 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive theme park builder, but what's interesting about this one is that players are actually going to be building the same theme park together. The first half of the game has players installing roads and railways and also installing the various attractions. But once the 4th attraction is built, the gates of the park are going to open, moving players into the second phase of the game, where they're going to be able to move their meeples through the park and visit those various attractions in order to score victory points and earn money, and trigger the end of the game, because once a player has visited all the attractions, that's going to trigger the end scoring. And the way the players are going to be doing all of this throughout the game is by taking turns and then just performing one action on their turn. During the first phase of the game, the actions that are available to you will allow you to place tracks or roads, and you'll also be earning money for any of those tracks that you play. With that money, you can purchase various attractions or rides that you can also place into the park. And you can actually purchase a ride and then any of the associated facilities that match that ride's icon, pairing them together and increasing the amount of revenue that that ride can bring. But of course you'll need mechanics in order to build these rides and then operators to run them, and that is one of the actions, is to hire various team members. The operators and the mechanics are required in order to build and run your rides, but the other characters are optional and come with various bonuses throughout the game. And like I said, once that 4th attraction is built, it does open up the gates of the park and kick off the second phase of the game, but that doesn't mean that your theme park is going to stop growing, because you can still perform all these same actions on the second half of the game. But now that those gates are open, this is going to allow for a whole new set of actions to be performed through the use of each of the player's action cards, because each player is going to have a hand of action cards, and as you use these, you're always going to be replenishing them back up to your hand limit at the end of your turn. But you're essentially going to be using these to move your meeples into the park, paying the entrance fee, which is going to be increasing as more and more rides are added into the park. Then you're going to be trying to visit the various rides, and then you're going to be gaining money if you own that ride or spending it if it's one of your opponents. And you can also take the train to get around the park quicker, and the same goes there. If you are using your opponent's train station, then you're going to have to pay them, but they're going to have to pay you to use yours. You do have a limited number of these action cards that you can play on your turn, but some of the path tiles that players put out at the start of the game will actually have a card icon located on it, and if you do land on that space, that will allow you to play more cards. And these cards can have a whole variety of effects. They don't just allow you to move around out on the board. They can allow you to break down or fix different rides, or even allow you to do certain actions for free. And of course, you'll be trying to use these to your advantage to try and squeak ahead of the competition. The first player to visit all the rides triggers the end of the game, and then players are going to be adding up their total victory points based on the remaining money, any of their action cards that grant them victory points, as well as their completed buildings and train stations, and finally from the rides that they're able to visit. The player with the most victory points wins the game, and if you're interested in this one, you can check it out. I have it linked in the description below. And also launching on September 19th, we have a new expansion for the game Beast, and this one is called Beast Shattered Isles, and it plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And if you're not familiar with the original game, this is a one versus many hidden movement game, where one player is going to be playing as a formidable beast, while the other players play as the various townsfolk and hunters trying to take that beast out. Each of the teams are going to have their own objectives that they're trying to fulfill in order to level up their characters and hopefully be the ones to win the game. The Beast normally always knows exactly where all the players are located, but the Beast is the one that's going to be hiding back into the forest, only revealing themselves at certain points in the game, either by choice because it's required as part of one of the actions that they want to perform, or because one of the human players was able to reveal them. And I will get into exactly how this game actually plays in a moment here, but first I want to explain what the new expansion is going to be adding to the game. And it does add quite a bit because there's going to be new maps, new contracts, as well as new hunters and beasts. And each of these are also going to be coming with their own new mechanisms as well to add a lot more variety to the game. And of course you can mix and match all of this to make every game feel very different than the last. If you do want to know what each of these new characters are going to be adding to the game, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below, but I'll just go over a couple of the beasts just to give you an idea of what you can expect. The first beast is known as the Feather King, and this one's actually going to be starting the game in a weakened form, but what's unique about this one is that its beast board is double-sided, and once you're able to shed enough blood and complete the objective in order to reach your final form, you'll actually be flipping that board to the other side and gaining full access to your more powerful abilities. This beast can also play some of its abilities as blue or red actions, allowing for more combo potential that can't be accomplished with any of the other beasts. And the second beast being offered in this campaign is known as Vacker, and this one actually spends soul tokens in order to supercharge its abilities, and as you're spending those souls, you're going to be putting them into the spent souls section of your board. Of course, once you've spent them, they aren't much use to you anymore, but they can be replenished, but anytime that you replenish all your souls, you do have to reveal yourself. This is going to create some really interesting decisions for the beast player because they're going to have to try and do that when they feel like they'll still be able to go back into hiding safely. Of course, there's going to be a ton more that this expansion is going to allow you to mix into the game, but the core rules of the game remain the same, and you do need the base game in order to use this expansion, but it will also be offered as part of this campaign. And if you do want to know more details on how the game actually plays, I did cover this one in detail during its previous campaign, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And if this does sound interesting to you, definitely go ahead and check out the campaign and follow along because it'll get a miniature added to your pledge completely for free. And this is a hidden movement 1 versus many game where players are either going to be playing as a party of hunters, where each player is going to be playing as an individual hunter with their own special abilities, or they're going to be playing as one of the many beasts and have their own special abilities that can be upgraded throughout the game. Each game is also going to have a contract randomly assigned to it, which is going to outline some different objectives for each player to try and fulfill by a certain point in the game. And if they're able to do that, they're going to get rewarded for it. So these are really neat because they're going to incentivize the players to try and fulfill these goals, which may put them at risk while doing so. But in doing so, will also give them some really nice bonuses that are hard to turn down. The contracts will also dictate the win conditions for the game and when the game ends. And I think this is a really neat take on a hidden movement game, and that's why this one's going to be my pick of the week. The gameplay looks very interesting. There's definitely a ton of variability in this game with the different beasts, hunters, and contracts. And there's also going to be 2 maps that players can choose from when they go to play a game. And I think this game is going to do a really great job generating the feel that it's going for of being hunted or doing the hunting. And the reason I say that is because this whole game is centered around the heroes always being known where they are from the beast's perspective, but never really knowing where the beast is. But occasionally heroes will come into close contact with the beast, and that beast will make its presence known periodically as it jumps out of hiding to try and eat different animals or attack different heroes. But then just as quickly jumps back into hiding, leaving it to the heroes to try and track down whatever trail is left behind. And each round in this game plays over 3 phases. There's the dawn phase, the day phase, and the night phase. During the dawn phase, players are going to be placing any tokens on the map, and then going through a drafting phase where players are drafting cards amongst each other, and all players will be drafting from the same decks of cards because each card has both a hero portion on it and a beast portion. So even the beast will be taking cards away from the heroes and vice versa as cards are drafted. After that, we have the day phase, and in this phase, the beast is going to be pre-programming their movements, and the beast is going to be using different cards in order to do that. But the beast's goal is to try and kill the 3 nobles on the map, so they're going to be trying to make their way towards those nobles and take them out. But the nobles are strong and do have a fair bit of health, so the beast may not want to go straight to the nobles, but rather take out some of the easier prey along the way to try and level up their skills and abilities. This could include different animals in the forest or some weaker humans that they might encounter. And if the beast ever makes an attack of its own, it's going to reveal itself. Players will then play their action cards to move across the board, and if they ever happen to cross over the path of the beast, then the beast player must put a trail token indicating that the player is close. The hero can also play a hunt action if they think they're on the same space as the beast, and if that is true, then they inflict damage on the beast. Once all players have performed their actions, the night phase begins, where players will be able to spend tokens to upgrade their characters or their beast. And then the rounds repeat until either the heroes or the beast have fulfilled their win condition, and at that point they would win the game. Definitely an interesting game here, and there are quite a few comments over on Board Game Geek from people that have actually played the game. Definitely check those out if you want more info. And of course I have links to this campaign in the description below, and you can go ahead and click to get notified if this one interests you. And also launching on September 19th, we have Millennia, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive civilization game where you're going to be building up an engine. But what makes this one really unique and interesting is that the cards that you're going to be gaining that you'll be using to build up your engine will each have icons that improve different aspects of your civilization, but they are only good for a certain number of ages, because like a lot of things in the past, they do go obsolete, and you'll be losing the benefits of that card once a certain age is reached. I really like this idea both thematically, but then also from a design perspective, because this is going to make this engine builder a lot different from many other engine builders out there, because rather than building that engine linearly, this is going to create more of a bumpy engine builder where you're going to be losing parts of your engine periodically throughout the game, but hopefully you're adding more on than you're losing so that you're always moving forward in your progression. But this is a game that plays over a series of rounds, and at the start of each round, players are going to be drafting the technology cards located on the left-hand side of the board. Each of these rows is going to be associated with a certain amount of coins that you're going to gain for drafting a card in that row, but then each of the cards are going to have their own abilities as well as icons that you'll be able to spend to move up these various tracks. But after players have completed the drafting of those various cards, you don't spend those icons just yet, because you'll be able to spend any of the gold you earned in order to buy some of these buildings and wonders that are located on the right hand side of the board. And these cards work very similar to the tech cards, except they're going to be offering you more unique abilities that can even chain off other cards, and they do tend to be more powerful. After players have drafted those tech cards and bought any building cards that they want to purchase, players will then take turns exhausting any of their cards in order to gain the associated benefits. This can do things like gain you victory points, gain you even more cards, or even permanent bonuses. But like I said, you will also be spending those sets of icons on the different tech cards in order to match them to the various tracks, in order to move yourself up those tracks. And each of these tracks do have a set number of icons that you're trying to match up in order to move up that track, except for the top one, which is going to be dictated by the cards located at the top of the board. This just means that the requirements to move up that track are going to be changing every single round, and you can only move up that specific track once per round. Players can also spend their icons to gain different resources and benefits located at the bottom of the board, so players will also want to consider this as well. But like I said, you can gain all sorts of different bonuses by moving up these tracks. The top one's going to be earning you more victory points at the end of the game. Some of these tracks even offer multiple paths where you'll be able to choose the direction you want to go, with each of them having their own pros and cons, while other ones might deviate but will have a certain requirement in order for you to go down the other more beneficial path. Some actions may also have you comparing your military strength with the other players, so of course there is the military track to resolve those different scenarios, and players can find themselves moving down a track as well, whether it's a consequence of a decision that they made or by engaging in combat with the other player. The game continues like this, with players drafting those technology cards, gaining money, and then purchasing those buildings, and then exhausting all those different cards to perform the various actions and move up those various tracks. And the player with the most victory points at the end of the 8th era wins the game, and if this one sounds interesting to you, you can check it out. I got it linked in the description below. Also launching on September 19th, we have Transmissions, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And this is going to be the second printing of the game, and I did cover this one before, so I'll just go ahead and roll my previous footage for you in a minute here. But this will be offering everything from that original campaign, including all 4 expansions and even the Kickstarter exclusive miniatures. This one features some really neat whimsical artwork, which is worth checking out the campaign just for that. So if you do want to see what this campaign has to offer, or if the game does look interesting to you, I'll have a link in the description below, but I'll just go ahead and roll my previous footage for you now. and Transmissions is a worker placement based on the robot art series created by Matt Dixon. I just did a quick search here to pull up the series and to see what it looks like, and I really like the artwork. It kind of gives me a robotic Banksy sort of vibe, and there's kind of a bittersweet anthropomorphism of the robot. It took me like 5 tries to say that word. And this game features a rondel style board and some really nice miniatures to match the artwork. And I don't think there's going to be too many miniatures in this game. It looks like there's just going to be 4. So I'm not expecting any miniature bloat with this game, which is something that I'm really happy about. And the robots in this game are used as the workers for the worker placement. And the interesting thing about that is that they're actually shared workers that all players are going to be manipulating together. But don't get me wrong, this is still a competitive game, and players are going to be competing to collect resources like electricity and engrams, which I believe are fragments of memories, and players are going to be using those resources to gather ideas to improve their robots or items to score points at the end of the game. Players will also be building up their own set of connected flowing pipes and gathering birds and butterflies to score even more points throughout the game. The game ends in one of 3 ways. Either there's no ideas left to be gathered, the player's robots are completely upgraded, or there's no more pipes remaining to be built. Also launching on the 19th, we have Storyburg, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 180 minutes to play. And this one is a deck-building co-op adventure that merges the worlds of Neverland, Wonderland, and the Dream World. Players are going to be playing as characters within these worlds and also seeing familiar faces as well as they navigate through a narrative campaign that features many elements of an RPG, but without requiring a game master in order to play this game. Not only are players going to be traveling across all these different worlds as they play throughout the campaign, but you're also going to be facing different bosses at the end of each of the chapters, and you'll also be able to level up your characters, making them more formidable as the game goes on. But on a player's turn, you're going to have another player draw a card from the story deck and then read the dialogue to that player. This will present them with different options or challenges that player is going to have to deal with, usually involving either a skill check with rolling dice or making different decisions depending on what's presented. But of course, this is a deck building game, so players will be able to use any cards that they currently have from their deck in order to try and make different rerolls, inflict damage on any enemies, or maybe perform other actions and abilities that can either get them out of the situation in a different way, or even just tip the scales in their favor. Some of the cards will just get used and put into your discard pile until it's reshuffled for you to redraw from again, while other cards will allow you to equip them to gain some ongoing special effects. But if you gained any money from the event or from the cards that you managed to play, you can actually spend that money to buy more cards from the market, which you can then add into your deck, which allows you to customize and specialize your deck for the future. The game continues like this, and like I said, players will be going up against various bosses at certain points in the story, and this is a family-friendly game, so everything is designed to be very quick and snappy, and you don't have to worry too much about complicated rules because all these enemies are just going to be resolving their attacks with basic dice rolls. And as always, if you do want to know more about this one, or if it does sound interesting to you, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below. Also launching on September 19th, we have the next campaign being offered by Awaken Realms, and this one's called Dragon Eclipse, and it plays 1 to 2 players and takes about 1 to 2 hours to play. And if this one wasn't on your radar until now and you're hoping to save a bit of money, you'll probably want to skip to the next game because this one looks really, really good, so it's no surprise to me that this one is our Discord pick of the week. And it was a tough choice for me this week, but this one is also my own personal pick of the week. I really do like what I'm seeing with this one. I'll get into the reasons why in just a second here, but if you haven't heard about this game yet, this is a deck-building narrative campaign game that is heavily influenced by games like Pokemon. Players are going to be acting as tamers in this mythical world where people and creatures work together, with each of these creatures having different abilities and strengths and weaknesses, and of course a tendency to a specific element. Players will be discovering these different creatures through the narrative that the game offers, as well as through random encounters, with each of these creatures having their own stats for strength, defense, attack, and speed, and each of these creatures having their own starter deck of cards that players will be able to modify and persist throughout the game as they develop and train that specific creature. And this is one of the elements of the game that I really, really like, because this is a deck builder that doesn't concern you with just one deck. Since you're going to have a deck for each of the creatures that you bring into your team, you're going to be developing and getting attached to those creatures, and you're going to be gaining cards that will be assignable to specific creatures or assignable to specific element element types or assignable to any creature at all. And it's going to be up to you to decide how you want to distribute those and which of your creatures that you invest in the most. Not only this, but it means that some of your creatures are going to have more utility than others depending on the situation that you're in. So even though you might have one creature that is leveled up and stronger than any other creature in your arsenal, because of its elemental type and the various cards you've assigned to all the different creatures, that creature may not be the best choice for a particular situation. And this is a huge win for me because I really do like deck building games, but I do find them to be a little bit samey over time. But being able to manage a bunch of different decks at once and swapping them in and out depending on the situation that I'm in just sounds like a ton of fun and sounds like it's really going to keep things fresh. And I'm going to have to make really good decisions when deciding which cards I want to invest in which character. And of course, when there are creatures to be caught, you do gotta catch them all, and this does come with the nice perk of being able to fill out a whole encyclopedia. Whenever you discover these different creatures, you'll be able to add their cards into a booklet along with some additional information about them. But the way that players will be playing throughout the campaign is through the campaign booklet along with a main map. There's going to be various locations that you can visit, which is going to bring you into the location book, which is going to have a whole bunch of numbered locations that players can investigate and engage in different challenges or decisions that that specific location has to offer. A lot of these challenges will present the players with a few different outcomes that are normally gradually increasing in value until you hit a certain threshold, and then you're going to be getting something that's substantially worse. And the way this works is that each of those outcomes are going to be associated with a particular value. Players are going to be using a blackjack style push your luck mechanism as they draw cards one by one from the item deck, which you can see on the right here. And then you're going to be adding up any of the values located in the top right of that card, with the sum of those values indicating the outcome you'll get if you decide to stop drawing cards at that point. The push your luck comes into play here because these cards can come in a range of values, and if you go over a certain threshold, you're going to be getting diminishing returns. There's also some cards that have certain icons on them that can cause positive or negative effects depending on the challenge that you're trying to complete, and players will have to consider that as well. But each of these locations is also going to come with a timer located at the top of the page. And depending on how well you perform each of these challenges, this can move you any amount down that track, limiting the amount of time that you have to explore and interact with the various locations on this page. Once that does deplete all the way down to 0, there's also going to be an event that's going to be triggered, which can kick off more of the narrative developments, which can also be influenced by what you accomplished at that town and the different decisions that you made. The combat in this game also looks like a ton of fun, and there's a whole arena booklet that's going to allow you to play in all sorts of different types of arenas, because not only is there a deck building element to this, but there's also a spatial element as well, as you're going to be moving around on a board when you go up against other creatures that you'll have to try and defeat or potentially try to capture. But you will be using the cards from your deck in order to do different things like move around on this board, attack your opponent, gain special tokens, or perform various special effects. But what's really interesting here is that anytime you draw from the deck, you're going to be putting those cards face up underneath the slots on your side of the combat board, with each of those slots being associated with a certain amount of elemental tokens. These elemental tokens are going to be increasing by 1 for each slot you move over to the right, and anytime that you use one of those cards, you're going to be gaining the associated amount of tokens, and then any of the other cards are going to be shifting over to the right, making them offer you more tokens in the future. These tokens are really nice to earn because you can spend them to perform additional bonus actions on your turn, and the actions that are available to you are going to vary depending on your creature's elemental type. I really like this system because it's always going to be incentivizing you to play the rightmost card in order to get the most amount of elemental tokens, but of course that may not always be the card that you want to play, so this is going to create some good decisions as you weigh the pros and cons, debating if you want to get more of those tokens or if you want to play a specific card. And combat continues like this, alternating between the player's turn and the enemy's turn, where you're just going to be resolving one of the enemy's action cards. But the nice thing about this is that you always get to see one action card in advance, so you do have an opportunity to prepare for the enemy's attack. Any damage or status effects will be persisted on your creature after the battle is completed, so you will have to either use items or go to visit different hospitals in order to get that creature healed. And this is also something that I am a big fan of from a design standpoint, because if the creatures that you normally want to use are currently damaged, that's going to mean that you're going to want to use other creatures in your arsenal if you end up in an unexpected battle. Of course, combat is a central element in this game, and engaging in those different battles are going to open up all sorts of different opportunities for you to either add new creatures to your team, gain new attacks and special abilities that you'll be able to assign to the various creatures that you've already captured, or also gain special items that aren't limited to use just in battle, because you can also gain items that help you outside of battle with the various skill tests, or to help you heal your team, or help prepare you for a future battle. I do want to mention that I did have one concern with this game, with it being an Awakened Realms game, because a few of their previous releases did fall victim of being overly fiddly or complex, and with the nature of this game, I could see it being quite a hit with my nephews that are fans of Pokemon, so I might want to play it with them. And I know that won't be possible if this is a game that asks way too much of its players, mostly because I probably won't want to play through the campaign either if that's the case. So I did go ahead and check out the designer that designed this game, and he did design a few other Awakened Realms games, but I'm happy to say that he did design the games that I would consider the more impressive and well-designed games, like the Great Wall, which I didn't have any issues with. I have high hopes that he'll do a good job on this one as well, because I'm really liking what I'm seeing so far, and there's nothing standing out to me as a red flag just yet, but I will be watching this campaign as it develops and checking it out even more as more information is released, and I recommend you do that as well. And if you are interested in this one, make sure to go ahead and follow it, because it'll be adding another creature to the campaign, and of course, if you do want to check it out, I have it linked down below. And also launching on the 19th, we have the Mini One Deck Game and Scorecards, which is essentially a 52 card deck of square cards, which are designed to be the most flexible cards in the world, because these cards can be used for a bunch of different applications. Of course, these cards can just be used as regular playing cards to play whatever card game you want to play, but what I'm showing you here are actually the Joker cards, with each of them showing you setup for a different game that normally isn't played with using playing cards. But the way that these cards are designed does allow you to play a whole variety of games, because each of the cards will have a different icon on it, representing anything from a poker chip to a chess piece to even a value of a die. This whole combination allows you to use these cards to do other things like playing chess, dominoes, checkers, or backgammon, and even just use them as poker chips. For example, if you're setting up a game of chess or checkers, you're just going to be grabbing all the associated cards of your color that match the tokens needed for that game, and then all the remaining cards are going to be used to set up the board, simply putting them face down to represent that grid. Whenever you move a piece forward and it's landing on one of those face down cards, you're just going to be swapping those two cards' location, which is going to allow you to keep track of the grid of the board while still allowing you to move all your pieces around as normal. I'm not going to get into each of the different use cases here, but this is a list of a few of the games that you can play by using those cards. But like I said, you can also use them for rolling dice or just playing any card game that you want. And if you are interested on how you use these cards for any of the specific games that I didn't talk about, I do have a link to the campaign in the description below, and it will have all the details for you there. And also launching on September 19th, we have Canopy Evergreen, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And this one is a standalone expansion to the original game that borrows the same set collection and card drafting mechanisms, but then adds a lot more on top of it and brings in a lot more table presence. But if you're not familiar with how the original game plays, I'll just go ahead and explain that to you first so you have a good idea of what to expect. Because in this game, players are going to be drafting cards in order to build up their forest. There are a whole bunch of cards you can gain in this game, with most of them offering you some sort of positive set collection potential, but there are also cards you can gain that have negative effects as well. But something that I really do like about this game is that even if you gain those cards with the negative effects, you can often try to gain multiple of those cards or even combine those cards with other cards to change their effects completely, often into even a positive effect. This allows you to kind of roll with the punches if you happen to gain a card that you don't necessarily want, or to try and push your luck if you think you can get the required sets. But the way the players are going to be gaining cards is that there's going to be 3 different stacks located in the center of the table, And each player is going to be taking turns looking at the first stack, deciding if they want to take all those cards into their hand. If they do, they're just going to be taking those cards into their hand and then adding it to their tableau following the placement rules of those cards. But if they decide not to take that stack of cards, they're going to be putting it back down on the table face down, adding an additional card from the draw pile, and then they're going to be able to look at the second stack of cards. This repeats with the players looking at the second deck, deciding whether or not they want to take that into their hand, and if they don't, they're going to be putting it back down, adding an additional card. Same goes with the third stack, but if they pass on that final stack, they're just going to be drawing a card blindly from the draw deck. That's pretty much everything there is to a turn, but like I said, there's a whole bunch of different types of cards that you can add into your possession. There are the trunk cards that every player is going to be starting with one at the beginning of the game, but anytime that you gain a new trunk card, that allows you to either start a new tree, or you can add it to an existing trunk to make a tree taller. Each of those trunk cards will come with an associated amount of victory points, but then players can also gain Canopy cards, and if they do draw one of these into their hand, they have to play it immediately, and if you're able to play it, it's going to be going on top of one of your trunks, or if you don't have a spot to put it, that Canopy is going to be discarded. The nice thing about the Canopies is it does multiply the points of each of your trunks by the amount dictated by the card. Players can also find themselves with different plant and weather cards that do offer different set collection potential, and you'll just be trying to collect multiples of those sets or pairs of certain sets in order to get the most victory points as you can. Wildlife cards that can grant you special abilities or scoring potential. And then there are the seed cards, which if you gain those will allow you to draw up a certain number of cards at the end of the round, but then you'll only be picking a few of those to add into your tableau, which is a really nice way to have more options with very little risk. But the forest is not always a safe place, and you might find yourself with drought, disease, or fire cards, which are going to cause you to potentially discard cards from your tableau. But they do have varying effects, and their effects can change depending on what other cards you're able to combo them with. Doing this just right can sometimes allow you to deflect those issues to your opponent players. At the end of the round, players will also be scoring any of their completed trees, and you'll be gaining the victory points for that and then putting an animal token onto that tree just to indicate that it's already been scored, because each tree can only gain you victory points once. The game continues like this over a series of rounds, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, but there is also additional victory points you can gain for having the tallest tree or completing different specific objectives. The new version of the game is going to be playing very similar to that original game, but pretty much every aspect of it has been upgraded. The artwork is done by the same artist, but I would say that this newer version does feature more lush and vibrant art, and I do think it is a step up from the original, but also players are going to be building up their forests on their own personal forest board. This is going to massively improve the table presence of the game, because each player is essentially building up their own little diorama of their own specific forest, as they're going to be adding stackable tree tokens, fruits and plants that they'll be able to place into designated locations, and then also add various animals and wildlife that they'll be able to acquire throughout the game, with each of those animals coming with their own token and unique special ability that might even allow you to deploy them on other areas out on the table. Really nice looking game here with a solid improvement over the original. Of course, the whole new set of cards in this one is going to be introducing a bunch of new mechanisms and surprises and different ways to play the game in comparison to the original. So if you do own the original, both of these games might be enough to stand up on their own. But if you are looking to just add one of these to your collection, I do think that this one looks like the real winner here. And if you are interested in it like I am, you can find links to it in the description below, and of course click to get notified. Also launching on the 19th, we have Dark Tome Bloodthorn Island, and this plays 1 to 5 players. It takes about 20 to 50 minutes to play, and this is a cooperative dungeon crawl game that fits all into a very tiny tin. The way that this game works is that there's going to be 3 different decks, with each of those decks representing 3 different levels of the dungeon that you're going to have to try and make your way through. In order to progress through the dungeon, you have to defeat every enemy that you come across, and you also have to make it to the end. If the players are able to accomplish both those tasks, then they will win the game, but each player is also going to be playing as their own unique character, with 4 different actions that they're going to be choosing from as they make their way throughout the dungeon. Players are just going to be going through one level of the dungeon at a time, and in order to set up that level of the dungeon, you're going to be taking cards randomly from the associated deck, and then putting them in the particular shape according to the setup card. Cards don't have any specific orientation that they need to be, so it does add a lot of variety from game to game, but the cards are put face down until a player reveals them by moving over to the edge of one of the cards that they're currently located on. During a round, players are going to be taking turns performing one of their actions on their turn, but then performing as many free actions as they like. In order to perform their main action, you're going to be taking your action token and then putting it on one of the 4 sections of your 2 action cards. This is going to allow you to perform all sorts of different actions like attack the enemies, move stealthily through the dungeon, or even heal yourself or your accompanying players. But one thing to note here is that you do have to move this action token to a new location every single turn, which means that that action you just performed won't be available on your following turn. Each player is also going to have a base number of movement that they'll be able to spend during their turn. That's going to allow you to move around on the dungeon to explore different areas and perform your free actions like revealing adjacent cards, interacting with different objects, or even picking up items. Whenever you do either of those things, you're going to be drawing cards from the associated deck, which can grant you with some one-time use abilities or actions. But whenever a monster is revealed, players are going to be drawing a card from the monster deck in order to determine what type of monster that is, and then players will be able to attack that monster. But once all the players have performed their actions, that ends the round for the players, and then each of the monsters are going to be activated, attacking whichever characters they're able to attack, prioritizing attacking multiple characters if they are able to do so. The enemies work a little bit simpler with just some instructions on the card that let you know how far they can move and then how much damage they're going to do and how many enemies they can attack. But it's not just the enemies that the players need to worry about, because the dungeon itself does come with its own dangers, and during the enemy's turn you're also going to be rolling a die to determine if there's any seismic events within the dungeon, which can potentially issue damage to every single one of your characters. This new edition of the game is going to be taking players to a brand new location with its own set of dungeons, enemies, and characters, and players will also be able to interact with some new mechanisms as well, as there will be a nice little ship added to the game, which you can use to navigate over different sections of water. And now for games launching on September 20th, we have Square and Compass, and in this game, players are going to be represented by 2 different famous architects, and together it's going to dictate the special abilities and the incentives that the player gets for performing different actions. In order to perform actions in this game, each of the players will be using their action tiles, which are each associated with a different action type, and you're going to be starting with just 3 of these at the beginning of the game, but you will gain 3 more as the game progresses. Players are going to be assigning these different tokens to various locations of the market in order to gain the associated amount of resources, or to gain a specific contract that players will be spending those resources in order to complete. Completing these different contracts is the main way to gain victory points throughout the game, but players can also gain additional bonus victory points if they're able to complete those contracts with special resources, or if they complete certain combinations of contracts in order to complete certain sets. But other than using your actions to gain contracts or resources, players can also use their actions to hire new technicians. This is going to grant players with additional special abilities or actions that they can use to their advantage throughout the game, and the end of the game is going to be triggered once a single player is able to complete 7 contracts. The player with the most victory points at that point wins the game, and if this one sounds interesting to you, I have it linked down below. And for this next game, I couldn't really find too much more information other than the general theme of it, but it is called Super Squad High, and this one's going to be launching on September 20th as well. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 120 minutes to play. And in this game, players are going to be playing as student superheroes as they try to keep up with their grades and their interpersonal relationships, but then they're going to be fighting crime by night while trying to keep their identities hidden. When it comes to fighting crime, players are going to have a limited amount of gear, which is going to essentially dictate when you want to take on those various battles versus putting your efforts into other things like school or your relationships. This game does also feature a bit of a dating simulator in it as well, so if that is something that sounds like an interesting combination to you, I do have it linked down below. Unfortunately, I don't have too much more on how this game plays, so if you do want to know more about it, you can always check out the campaign itself. And launching on September 21st, we have Save Snowball. And this plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is an escape room style card game where players are going to be working together to try and rescue their missing rabbit. In order to do this, players are going to be using cards from a main deck, which is going to provide the players with different clues, rooms to explore, as well as puzzles that players will have to solve. Whichever player's turn it is going to be drawing a card from the deck and then reading the clue out loud, and also revealing any associated images. Players are going to be using those clues and images to solve the puzzle, with each of these puzzles having a solution that's a 2 or 3 digit number. Once players think they have deciphered the clue and they know what that number is, you're going to be finding the other card that matches that number, and if that card has a check mark beside the number of the card that brought you there, then you know it was correct. If that's correct, it's going to lead them to the next clue, and the game continues like this with players solving the various clues, but there are a few different paths that players can take along the way, and if the players do get stuck, there are a number of clues associated with each card, which players can read one at a time to try and help them along the way. And as always, if you want to check out more about this one, I do have it linked in the description below. And launching on September 23rd, we have Stormcat 9, and this is a game where players are each going to be choosing a colored cat at the beginning of the game. And then based on the cats that are selected, you're going to be taking the cards that are associated with those cats and then shuffling them all into a single draw deck. You're then going to be dealing 8 cards to each player, and then players are going to be taking turns drawing a card and playing a card to the various areas of the board. These cards can come in various forms with different effects, but players are going to be essentially playing them to heal their own cat or attack the others, and also move the cats around to the different areas of the board, find the cards that they need in order to level up their cat, and activate their cat's abilities. So as players are attacking and defending against each other, each player also has the motive to try and get the cards they need in order to reach their final form. First player that's able to do that wins the game, and if you want to know more about this one, you can check it out in the description below. Also launching on the 23rd, we have Fantasy Farfadet Quest, and this is an adventure game where players are going to be playing cooperatively as different characters, and we'll be playing through a narrative campaign. Each chapter is going to have the players exploring a map and engaging in skirmish-style combat, and the decisions and successes that you make along the way are going to change the story as it progresses. I'm sorry if I'm a little generic on these last few games. Most of these I just didn't have enough information on to go into the usual detail that I like to go into, while other ones I just didn't have the time with so many games being launched this week. And those are finally all the campaigns I have for you this week. I have no idea how long this video is going to be, but why not make it a bit longer, because we do have a silly amount of giveaways to announce. You definitely don't want to leave yet, because we have the Isofarian Guard, Mycelia, Fromage, Rogue Angels, Haggis and Tricktakers. But in order to enter yourself into those giveaways, all you gotta do is leave a comment down below. And if you're not familiar with the Isofarian Guard, this is a narrative campaign game where players are going to be working cooperatively as their own individual characters as they explore the world in a true open world fashion. This game allows you to explore any area that you want, with each of those locations being associated with a specific number. That's going to dictate what sort of enemies you might find there, what town you'll be able to visit, and also if it's associated with a particular quest, there will be information for that as well. Of course, certain areas might be blocked off or inaccessible until you reach a certain point in the campaign, but players will always know where to go for the next main campaign mission. But that doesn't mean players need to go straight there, because there are a ton of side quests to discover, gear to find, and enemies to battle. And the battles are really interesting in this game, because you're going to be drawing a token and then matching that with a location that you're currently at, taking that specific monster and its associated deck and setting up the monster board. Players will then be fighting against that enemy by drawing tokens from their own personal draw bag, which they'll then be able to spend to activate certain abilities on their player board. The cool thing here is that players do have some control with the tokens that go into their draw bag, because players are going to be adding those based on the gear and item and stats that they developed on their characters so far. And the game continues like this, with players progressing through the main campaign and side quests, discovering new gear and items to level up their characters, and also progressing on their own personal tech tree. And this giveaway is going to be for the full game pledge, which clocks in at $180. So I just want to thank the publishers for donating such a nice pledge here. This includes everything that you need in order to play the game, but it's also going to add any of the new content unlocked during the campaign. And to enter this giveaway, all you got to do is leave a comment down below, and you can say anything that you want, but just make sure to also include the hashtag Isofarian, because I'm going to be announcing a ton of giveaways in this video, and I do need a way to separate them when I go ahead and draw the winners for next week. And the next giveaway we have is going to be for a pledge for Mycelia, which is a strategic mushroom growing game where each player is going to be starting the game with their own mother mushroom out on the main board. And this is your only mushroom that you'll be able to move from tile to tile. The players are going to be using actions to expand the board, to create new locations, to grow mushrooms, as well as to move their mother mushroom around on the board, like I mentioned, and also create spores from any of the mushrooms that they currently have on the board. Players are going to be trying to gain control of the specific tiles with the spore cubes that they need in order to grow new mushrooms. And if you do have the matching colored spores for one of your mushroom cards, then you'll be able to perform an action to grow that mushroom, which means placing that card on your own personal board, and then issuing the mushroom token out on one of the tiles where you claimed at least one spore. But my favorite part about this game is that each of these mushrooms are going to be coming with their own special ability or action, and anytime that you spore a specific mushroom, you're going to be moving its spore token up on its spore track. Once that token reaches the end of the track, that's actually going to cause that mushroom to decay, and you're going to be taking that mushroom card and sliding it behind that board, which is going to activate that mushroom's ability. But then you also gain that mushroom token back, allowing you to use it again to grow a new mushroom. And this giveaway is going to be for the standard pledge, which comes with the core game and all unlocked stretch goals. And under this giveaway, it's going to be exactly the same as the previous one. All you got to do is leave a comment down below. You can say whatever you want, just make sure to leave the hashtag Mycelia on the comment. And the next giveaway is going to be for a pledge for Fromage, which is a game all about making gourmet cheese. And in this game, players are going to be placing workers out on a rotating Lazy Susan board, only interacting with the location that's directly in front of them. Each round, this is going to be rotating, changing which location you have access to, but then any of your meeples are actually going to be remaining on that board, and you only get them back once the board rotates enough that your meeple is facing towards you. The different locations do have your meeples facing different directions depending on which space you put them into, and the direction does dictate how many rotations are needed before that worker comes back. But each of these different locations are going to be scoring a little bit differently, and players are going to be placing their cheese tokens, which are going to be remaining on those boards for the entirety of the game, which is going to be limiting the number of options available as the game goes on. Players will also be trying to complete different orders for additional victory points at the end of the game, and you can also build up your creamery with different buildings to gain special abilities and effects, and you can also spend different resources like milk or berries in order to augment your actions or open up new possibilities. The player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and this giveaway is going to be for the limited edition pledge. This is going to get you the core game, all unlocked stretch goals, and the deluxeified components. And under this giveaway, just the same as the previous ones, just leave a comment down below, but in this one, leave the hashtag Fromage. And the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for Rogue Angels. And this one is a cooperative game where players are going to be playing through a few different scenarios and go up against different enemies and aliens as you progress through a campaign. If you're a fan of games like Zombicide or Cthulhu Death May Die, I think you'll definitely want to check this one out because it does share some similar elements like trying to complete different objectives at different locations on the map and interacting with different rooms and enemies in very similar ways. But this one is doing its own thing here, and I think the combat here is way more interesting than anything any of the Zombicides have had to offer, because the way that players perform actions in this game is through the use of action cards, and anytime that you play one of these cards, you're going to be playing it to the bottom of your player board. This essentially puts it into cooldown, and it will be moving over periodically throughout the rounds, but you can also play other actions to try and speed that up and get those cards back. But what else is really interesting here is that you can get some negative effects and consequences for certain actions or damage that you might incur, and these will also come in the form of cards, and they will also get put into that same area. And as long as those negative effect cards are in that area, those negative effects will be affecting your character. This creates another situation where you might want to perform your actions to try and speed up the recycling of those cards in order to get those negative effect cards out of your player board. But of course, this is only a quick overview of the game. There's a bunch of other really interesting aspects as well, and there's also going to be different choices that players can make as they progress through the various stories. But if you are interested in this giveaway, this one is going to be offered worldwide, so anyone can feel free to enter into this giveaway. Just make sure to leave a comment down below with the hashtag Rogue, and that will get you a chance to win a copy of the game and all unlocked stretch goals. And the last giveaway we have is going to be for a trick-taking game, because this one is for Haggis and Tricktakers, and this is going to be offering you up 2 different games to choose from. Haggis is going to be a climbing-style trick-taking game, which means that you're going to be creating different sets, whether it's a single card or 2 matching cards of the same value, or even creating runs of cards and then playing them out into the center of the table as a trick. And then all the other players do have to match your style of trick, but then also play cards of a higher value in order to play those cards into the trick. This is going to continue until all the players pass, and then the last player to have played any cards into that trick is going to be winning that trick and taking those cards into their possession. There's a few things that do make this trick-taking game a little bit more unique from a lot of other trick-taking games. And the first one is that there are going to be some wild cards that players will have face up in front of them, so that all the players know how many wild cards you still have left, and you'll be able to use those in order to create different sets where maybe you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. But then players can also create special sets of cards known as a bomb. And anytime you do that, it's going to destroy any of the sets that are currently in play, allowing you to lead the following trick, which is always a good thing because the goal in this game is to be the first player to get rid of all your cards, and then that's going to be earning you victory points at the end of each round. The other trick-taking game we have is Tricktakers, and this one uses a more traditional style of trick-taking where you're going to have different suits of cards. There's always going to be one suit known as trump, and one player is going to be leading the trick by putting in a colored suit, and then all the other players have to follow that color if they're able to do so, but if they're not able, they can play any color that they want, including trump. And this is usually a good situation to play a trump card because that is usually going to be winning you that trick. But that is not always the case in this game because there's a few different things that makes this one unique, because each player is going to be playing as their own unique character, and these characters are all going to be trying to score in various ways. And that might mean winning or not winning various tricks depending on the certain situation and the character that you're playing as. Players can also win this game in 2 other ways outside of their character's specific win condition, either by winning 2 rounds by having the most tricks won in each of those rounds, or by winning absolutely no tricks for each of the 3 rounds. But the other thing that makes this trick-taking game unique is that there is a whole separate suit of cards known as the colorless cards. You can play these cards anytime that you want, even if you do have the lead suit in your hand, because these colorless cards don't count as any particular color, so playing them technically doesn't break the rules. Some of these colorless cards are worth less than every other card in the game, while others are worth more than most of them, including the trump cards, so you can use these in various ways depending on what your objectives are throughout the game. And this giveaway is going to be for one of these 2 trick-taking games of your choice, and all you got to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Haggis. And just a heads up that this one's offering free shipping only to the United States. Anyone can still enter this giveaway, but if you are entering from anywhere else in the world, then you do have to cover the shipping. So just keep that in mind if you decide to enter in this giveaway. And since we did have a ton of giveaways announced this week, here is a quick reminder of all the different hashtags you can leave in the comment section down below, entering you into each of the associated giveaways. I'm super excited to see who wins and also a little bit jealous. Let's go ahead and draw the winner for last week's giveaway, and this one was for a pledge for Galaxy Postman. And to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you do like this sort of content and the effort that I put into these videos, you can always check out the Patreon in the description below. A video like this one takes a ton of time and effort to put together, especially when we have over 20 games to cover. It also takes some willpower because everything in my body is telling me to go to sleep right now, and I am fighting it the best I can. So let's go ahead and draw those comments. And draw a winner. And the winner of Galaxy Postman is Hushed Stan Taffy, which is one of our viewers. So congratulations. Just reach out to me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out. But I do think I finally reached my limit for this video. It actually took me like 10 tries just to say that one sentence. So I think that's my cue to try and wrap up this video. But as always, I do appreciate you checking out this video and I do appreciate the support. And until next time, make sure to keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.